We start our journey into organizing visual information with the principle of balance. Balancing any layout means that you're arranging the positive elements and the negative space, as you'll see, so that no one area of the design overpowers the other, unless, of course, it's supposed to. Balance makes sure that everything works, everything fits together. Remember what I said about form and function and the idea of a spiritual union? As Frank Lloyd Wright said, the idea is that they're integrated. They work together, they support each other. Balance is a big part of achieving that. When a design is unbalanced, it means the individual elements are competing with the whole. They call too much attention to themselves. Our focus is on the trees, the individual parts, instead of the forest, the whole, the entire thing that's being communicated. That's the difference between a layout that looks like this, You see those large, weird areas of negative space between the elements? They're not consistent. They're different in size. The widths between elements are very different. So your eye naturally goes to those darker shapes, those pieces. Your eye is focused on the shapes as opposed to how everything that's there works together. Compare that to this, where everything is very ordered, structured, balanced. Notice that the negative space, the channels between each item, are the same width. That suggests a relation. That automatically says, through the eyes and to the brain, these things are interrelated. It makes it a lot easier to see how everything works together. All right, and I'm going to show you a concrete example of that. Smashing Magazine did a recent redesign, and unfortunately, for a design organization that should certainly know better, attention is drawn to the individual elements instead of clarifying how they're related to each other. There's a lot to look at here, and because of what they've done, in particular with negative space between elements, it's very difficult to sort of look at this as a whole. Related items don't hold together because there's too much separation. The symmetry that they're using here, notice how there's a split down the middle and the layout is purely symmetrical on both sides. It doesn't provide any balance because the gaps between elements are too numerous, there's too many of them, and they're too large. So what you see is essentially this. Again, the eye picks up on every single one of those darker elements that you see there, and our focus constantly gets pulled back to each of those individual shapes because of the varying negative space that surrounds them. That prevents us from quickly scanning, from quickly reading, and most importantly, from comprehending what we see because we're distracted. That's a subconscious thing, it's an instinctive thing, but the brain and the eyes are constantly zinging back to these individual elements. Like, what, instead of focusing on group, and quickly understanding what's there. Now, the way to solve this isn't with a radical redesign. We don't have to radically reimagine everything on the page here. All we have to do is adjust the negative space between elements to balance things, to create groups of related information as opposed to individual elements all screaming for our attention. That would look like this. And I'm going to show you a side-by-side comparison, but for right now, take a look at this. Everything is a lot more segregated in its own category. The nav items hold together. Most importantly, these articles, where you have the person's picture, their name, the article title, the links below to comments, the tags, performance, service workers checklist, they all hold together now as sort of one element. And that has everything to do with the amount of negative space around them. So let's look at these side by side and I'll show you the difference. Here's what we had before, and here's what we have now. Now, before I show you the abstracted version of this that makes this a little clearer, just take a look at that. Does it feel like everything holds together a little bit better? Does it feel like there's two chunks of articles, one on the left, one on the right, as opposed to disparate elements that may or may not be related? This is a small change, but to the subconscious, to the way the eyes and the brain work together, this is a very big deal. This shaves seconds off cognition. It also prevents the back and forth that I talked about before, where people will feel aggravated or confused or fatigued. And if you're in a usability lab, a testing situation, they won't be able to tell you why they feel that way. What they'll say is something generic like, oh, this page doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. It's hard to read. Or some other generic statement that essentially said, something here is bothering me, but I don't know what it is. All right. And here's what it is that's tripping them up. we've got a bunch of individual elements that, again, are sort of all floating in space, not holding together very well. Now, look at the option on the right. You see the difference? Closing those gaps turns a series of objects into a group of objects. That's how we perceive things. These abstractions is a way of demonstrating how the eye and the brain actually work together to perceive things. They're chunks of related information. On the left, the eye has to dig through and perceive 46 different visual elements. With the quick redesign, it's not really a redesign, but the adjustment on the right, the eye perceives 25 visual elements. A lot less cognitive work, which clarifies the relationships between things. So reducing cognitive effort by improving balance goes a long way in delivering positive user experiences. Again, that's not something anyone is ever going to be able to articulate to you, but it is most certainly there, and you have to watch out for this.